Hi, good morning. This is Damon Scott, Marketing Director here at PVBS, and I want to thank everyone for joining us on our introduction to Microsoft Dynamics NAV for Government Contractors. Today, we're going to be providing an overview of Microsoft Dynamics NAV for Government Contractors, which is a fully integrated business management solution. And today's presentation is going to include a little brief view of the executive dashboards, as well as the fully integrated web time and expense system, our project setup, which includes billing setup and managing funding, invoicing and invoice formats, as well as managing indirect rates. So to start, we have a little housekeeping, and I want to make sure that you're aware that this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our PVBS YouTube account later today. If you have any questions, you can post those into the question section, and we will try to get to those as we go along the webinar. If we cannot get to your question right away, we will try to save some time at the end to get to those. But again, if we can't get to all the questions, we'll just try to contact you separately. Also, later today, you should receive an email invitation to take a post-webinar survey. We would really appreciate your feedback to make this a better tool for everyone. So please take a few minutes and answer the questions. We do really appreciate that. All right, so today's agenda includes a brief introduction about PVBS. Then we're going to jump right into the demonstration of the product. And if we're able to, again, we'll answer those questions as we go along. So please post those into the questions section if you have anything or anything that you'd like to say. So PVBS, we are a top-tier Microsoft Business Solutions partner serving only the government contracting market. Our headquarters are just outside Washington, D.C. and Reston, Virginia. It gives us a unique access and insight into the GovCon community. Also, as an experienced leader with over 12 years of success in the government contracting market and an intelligent innovator with Microsoft systems, PVBS is a direct resource to both government contractors and the Microsoft community. Microsoft Dynamics NAV for Government Contractors, from PVBS, it's a rich, robust accounting solution, compliant with federal rules and regulation, and provides a complete integration and ease of use, which we'll demonstrate that, so you'll get to see that. PVBS, we are driven to develop excellence in providing the most comprehensive solution to our customers and our partnership channels. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to our featured presenter, Mr. Paul Skurpsky. Paul, welcome. I'll let you take over from here.
All right. Well, thanks, Damon, and welcome to everybody on the phone. We appreciate you taking time to join us today to learn a little bit about Microsoft Dynamics NAV. Just to give you a little insight, this product from Microsoft's been around for about 25 years now, and there's over the number now, the new updated number is 120,000 now. So 120,000 companies worldwide, and Microsoft also went over 2 million licensed users on the product. So it is the most widely used mid-market product in the world that we're going to show you today, and we're very excited to be a key partner with Microsoft on that solution. So for those of you that haven't worked with Microsoft or Microsoft partners in the past, Microsoft does 98% of their business through partners. So the few things that Microsoft you can go direct to them on is related to Office 365 and also their Azure offerings. So most of what Microsoft does is through partners, and we're a key partner on the Dynamics NAV side. So on that previous slide, Damon mentioned there's 4,000 NAV partners worldwide. There's about, I guess, 15 of us that are in the TAP program. And what TAP is responsible for is we're a technology adoption partner with Microsoft. So before they do that general release to market, we actually get that release from Microsoft. We're able to give them feedback and let them know how do we need to make it better for government contractors. This slide here that I'm showing right now talks about Microsoft's vertical approach, and their idea is they've got solutions that can meet several industries' needs, but they want partners to be that go-to expert for that particular market. So we've brought to bear a solution inside of Microsoft Dynamics for government contractors. That's what we're going to show you today is our solution. And another little slide that Damon had was our solutions are certified for Microsoft Dynamics. So that's CFMD. And what that means is actually the things that we've done to improve Dynamics for a government contractor, it's actually certified and tested by Microsoft before it's incorporated into the base system. So it gives you a little insight into our partnership with Microsoft. a very close relationship we have with them. So because I talked about, that future release and our involvement in proving out the solution, giving them feedback, I felt this is a good time to let people know kind of where Microsoft is at in terms of the life cycle of NAV. So you can see it started in 1987. We've got the last few versions shown and kind of what are the things that Microsoft has delivered in terms of capabilities. So today we're going to show NAV 2015, but we actually just heard from our Microsoft rep that next month Microsoft's going to introduce Dynamics NAV 2016. So we've actually got a preview of it already, and we'll be setting up some webinars in the following month to show 2016. And people are always wondering, what is the difference between Microsoft and other vendors in the mid-market, small mid-market ERP space for government contractors? And I think there's two big ones. I think one is around investment, and the other is around reporting and how things work with the Microsoft suite. So when you think about investment, people think, what is going to be available in that next version? This is a little preview of NAV 2016. What is Microsoft doing to make it better? So I'll start from the left-hand corner. The first thing, Office 365. So for any folks using Office 365 today, there's two main benefits. One is it says they've enhanced that in Office 365 experience. And what that means is you can actually have the client loaded, the Dynamics NAV client loaded into Office 365. So you can access the application from Office 365. The second thing is the little bullet that says works natively with Power BI. So for folks that haven't seen Power BI yet, actually I think what we'll do is, if we have time, we'll give you a little preview of what is Power BI. Other key things, you see Azure, that's Microsoft's cloud solution, Windows. So what they're saying is today they've got a desktop and a web experience, and with 2015 they introduced the tablet, and now with 2016 they're going to introduce the phone experience. So accessing certain information in NAV via a phone, everything, improved workflow, improved functionality, including positive pay in terms of bank account management. Then finally, improvements on the engineering side. And what that is around is Microsoft is going to start doing a release every year of the solution and updates every month. They're making it a lot easier for partners to seamlessly deliver that to clients. So that gives you a little preview of, where we're at today and where we're going. And now I'm going to show you NAV 2015, and then I'll sprinkle in a little at the end if we've got time to show you a little bit about, what is Power BI and how does that work. So let me go ahead and hop right into the demonstration. And what I'll start out with is a little general overview. And I'm going to cover the different aspects of the system, how it works, and show you just some general capabilities across the entire application. So I'm logged in to the core financial system. I'm logged in as an accounting manager. And what I'm seeing are, in the top left-hand corner, key activities that I'm responsible for performing or overseeing. For instance, invoices that are due that need to be created, expense reports that need to get reviewed by accounting before they're processed. I can drill into each one of those queues, and it shows me the detail of what makes up the total. So here's the one expense report that was submitted and approved, and accounting needs to process it. So I can actually open up that document, look at who approved it and when they approved it, so all the details down here. Also, any type of attachments. So if there was receipts that were attached from the web, I can see that detailed information right here. The idea is you get a view into information, and then you can continue to drill down to get additional insight into questions you might have about that record. I can also see different charts. So Microsoft offers a handful of different charts you can put on your home page. Integration for Outlook for those folks that are using Outlook today. And then different report scheduling pieces. So on the bottom right-hand corner, these are reports that I'm scheduling to be run, and when they're processed, I can schedule them for any time, even if during off hours, and then they can show up in my inbox. To give you an idea of the breadth of the application, I'll go to the department list, and from this department list, you see all the different modules that are available in the solution. So everything from, on the financial management side, the GL, AR, AP, fixed assets, sales order processing and management, purchasing management. We're going to spend a lot of our time on project accounting today, but on one of the slides it was mentioned that this solution is not only for professional services companies, so companies that have project-based work, but it's also for companies that manufacture goods for the government or if they resell product to the government. So those three verticals, are kind of our focus in terms of government contractors. And for companies that have all three of those plus commercial work, because the solution does a great job of handling your commercial business, those are companies that are a great fit for this solution. So we're going to get into, during the presentation, details about the different elements of the application, how they're used, and we'll walk through some examples there. We're also going to get into the web-based time and expense system. So this is the place that all of your employees are going to enter their time, enter their expenses, and also approval of those documents. So we'll walk through examples of time entry and expense entry and the whole process of how employees would interact with the system. I mentioned earlier this whole idea of reporting being something that Microsoft is focusing on. All the reporting tools are inherent to Microsoft, so they don't leverage any third-party tools. You're going to see every module has a series of reports. So within project accounting, I'm seeing information about project-based AR and job or project status report, job revenue summary, labor analysis, unbilled analysis. So the different reports are available by module. And then in addition to each module report, those use reporting services, there's another tool called Analysis Services, which is a data cube technology. And I'm showing it right now connected to Excel, but you could connect it to other front ends. But what this allows you to do is to take data from both the core financial system and time entry and make it available in this data cube so users can analyze the business in more of a graphical fashion. And the next step with this is that Power BI that we'll show later on in the presentation. So this is some standard dashboards that we've built based on feedback from clients. So a general business overview, so showing me a trend of revenue, profit, and AR. Balance sheet with key metrics over to the right. So giving you a little bit of visibility on overall financial leverage and financial health of the business. Income statement, cash flow, different indirect views. So for folks that have heavy cost type contracts, you can get visibility or provide visibility to folks in the organization about overall rate performance. So this one's showing me monthly, each one of my pools, what is my actual rate, what's my provisional rate. And then the second view in terms of indirects is giving me visibility of, year to date where our rates are. So it's showing me current period indirect rate details and then also year to date information in terms of my rates. So this is a set of financial views. There's also a set of project views. So these project views would be more for the operations team. And this would be information regarding profitability by job or by job and task. A burn rate report. So it's given me visibility of by period that I select, one or multiple jobs, whatever the list of tasks are underneath that. Each month, what is my project revenue, details about my operating expenses, including indirects, net income or loss, but also what was spent. So you can see when I select that cell and look up in my formula bar, there's no data keyed in there. It's just looking at that data cube, in this case the jobs cube, at a measure called total spent, filtered by the different criteria selected on this sheet. And now over to the right, you're seeing information regarding the last 6 months, how much of that funding is being used. Then based on the average of the last 3 months, a little prediction of how many months of funding that are left. So for folks that have limitation of funds clause in their contracts, it gives you a little visibility of 60 days prior to when you get to 75%, you need to notify the government. It gives you a little indication of when that might happen. The GL detail, this is information regarding the costing side. So all of the costs related to a particular project and range of tasks I select, you're seeing the detail of all those costs. You can expand them to learn more as needed. And then the labor detail is giving you visibility of the hours charged to a particular project over month detail there. And then in addition to that, folks oftentimes are looking to analyze on-the-fly information. So let me open I'm going to open a blank sheet up and show you how you could analyze things on the fly. So let me go ahead and open that up. And now you can see over to the right, these are some of the standard measures that are available. So we're going to talk today about job budgets. So this is all the budgeted data. So budgeted hours and labor costs and budgeted revenue and travel costs. The job ledger, this is my historical project data. So AR in different buckets and billings and labor, purchasing information, revenue, unposted data. So we can show information, like I mentioned, from the timesheet that hasn't been processed yet. We can also show information from the accounting system all within one view. And then down below, other measures related to profit and backlog. And then in terms of how I want to group it, grouping things by contract, customer, division, or other fields like type of job, whatever it might be. But the idea here is it allows a user to create analysis on the fly. So if I wanted to see, we talked about this idea of unposted hours. If I wanted to see how many hours have been recorded in the timesheet system but haven't been processed yet, I can select that as the measure I want to analyze. And now as I go up, let's also look at the hours that have already gone through the accounting system. So we'll put that as a measure I want to analyze, and there's the two of them side by side. And now how I group it is how the rows come into play. So for instance, if you were interested in looking at things by contract, I could select my contract, put that in there, and now here's my, make this a little bigger for folks. Here's my list of contracts and hours that have been entered into a timesheet and also hours that have gone through the accounting system. Maybe I want to look at a detail below contract. I want to see who are the PMs that are managing it, and then let's look at the contract. So I could say, let's look at it by project manager and then contract underneath of it. So now you can see the different people that are managing contracts and then the different projects or contracts that they're managing underneath of it. So you can continue to build that hierarchy, or you can actually expand these details to see what's underneath of it. So in this case, under this contract, there's just one open job, but you could expand other ones to see that I guess most of them have just one. Let's see if maybe the Seaport, it looks like the Seaport does also just have one, but if there was multiple jobs underneath of it, I would see the detail there. But the idea is it's a way to analyze in the fly and drag and drop information. So those are the different pieces of it. And now what I'll do is I'll go through what I call a day in the life. And what we'll do is we'll touch on how does that information get into the system so as a user I can analyze it. I'm going to start from the job setup side of it, and I'm going to go ahead and select one of the jobs on my home page. This home page area, as a user, you can manage the list of jobs you want to have on your home page and add and remove them as necessary. So very easy as a user to define what do they want to have on that home page dashboard and able to drill into it to see the details behind it. So as I pull up one of the jobs, some things to focus on related to this job. Over to the right, the status box is information about this job. So contract and funded value, revenue, direct labor hours, etc. Each one of these measures I can drill into it to see the details. So the AR balance on this job is $8,000. If I select that value, it drills into it to show the detail of what's behind it. So here are the 5 open AR entries, and if I want to know more about either of them, I can actually analyze everything from pull up the original invoice that created the AR. So if I show posted document here, it's going to pull up the original invoice. I could reprint it as many times as I want. I could also email it right from the screen. If I wanted to know, in this case, the AR was $1,672 originally, and now the remaining amount is $672. How did it get reduced by $1,000? I drill into that number, that $672 number, and now it takes me into all of the history of applications. So you can see that $1,000 got applied to that open AR entry on January 25th. To find out more about that applied payment, I could hit Navigate, and what Navigate shows me is every entry related to it. So when we applied that payment, it hit the general ledger, 2 different accounts, hit the customer ledger, that's AR subledger, and also my bank account. If I wanted to know what happened with the bank account when this was posted, if I hit show document here, you can see that it went into our Bank of America bank account for $1,000. Open means it hasn't cleared yet. So you're able on this entry screen to not only create the job, but after you create it, see additional details, in real time regarding this job, including any notes or links of documents associated with it. So let's talk a little bit about setting this job up and some of the capabilities here. So the internal job number, description of the work. One of the companies I met with this week, they were really impressed with this idea of it's a relational database. And because of that, anytime it's this little caret down, you're looking into a list. So in this case, it's a list of my customers. I can search by customer number, name, city, zip, or phone when I add a customer as the actual client we're doing the work for. What type of customer it is, so commercial, federal, state, and local government. Who's the main functional contact there? Again, looks into a list of all the contacts for my Department of Defense client. The PM, the period of performance, different information from a general perspective. When I go to the posting tab, this is the financial guts of the system. So it's everything from what is the performing organizations, that's the department code on this particular job, information about revenue and billing. There's default revenue and billing formula setups, but there also has an end user configuration options. So a good example is related to the billing pool group. This one's a cost plus fixed fee. And then in terms of my indirects, I can either use a corporate rate structure, or I could have different indirect rate from a billing perspective. For example, maybe there's no G&A applied to travel from a billing perspective on this job. So you can set up your billing pool group to define how does the indirects get applied as it relates to billing this particular job. Information about fee percent, fee amount, or any type of withholding data. On the contract tab, it's given me information about what is that primary contract. So if you remember earlier when we were in Excel and we selected the contract, this is how the system knows what contract the actual work is being performed under. So this contract, I could have one or multiple jobs where I'm performing work under this. That's the idea of an IDIQ or a BPA, some type of overarching contract vehicle. And if you want to see the volume of business underneath of it, that's where you're selecting it here. Contracting office and paying office related to that work. So those are some general setups related to the system. Now let me get into a little bit regarding the work breakdown structure, which is the next level down. So this is where your tasks and subtasks are defined in the application. So this WBS is a 60-character alphanumeric field, and by project you can decide what level of detail you want to track from a costing and charging perspective. The first thing to note is when I look at this particular project, you're seeing over in the right-hand columns, information about contract and funded value. It could be identified by CLIN or ACRN. That contract and funded value, it can be set at any level of the WBS. So for example, if I set the funding for 001, my Dynamics NAV implementation, if I set the contract and funded value at this level, that would mean that any level beneath of it, any 001 subtask, could use that funding. In my example, I set it at level 2, so I'm showing that for setup I've got $10 million in terms of overall contract value, and it's almost fully funded. To see the history of all those mods, I go to the modification detail button, and this is all the mods that have happened in terms of contract and funded value through time. If I want to enter an additional mod, I just go down to the next blank line, go ahead and type in what was the effective date. If I put in T, it puts in today's date. And what was the change in contract and funded value? Just go ahead and put in $250,000. And now, once I accept this change here and say OK, you're going to see the overall job gets updated, and then also that particular level of the WBS. So when we say OK, you can see it just went to 12.5 and 12.3 million. When we go back into that work breakdown structure, you're going to see that same type of update in terms of setup. Now we're over 11 million in contract value, almost 11 million funded. That information is stored in detail here. It can be accessed by anyone that has access to the system. The system has also role-based security, which defines who can actually see things in the system and can they actually read, write, modify, or delete data. But when I actually recorded that entry, that information might have came from the contracting officer via an email or maybe a document. You can actually use the integration with SharePoint there, and anytime you have some type of document you want to place against a master record, you can actually just take and drag and drop it against there. It's going to place it in SharePoint and create a link to that in the application, so it'll link it back for you. So that's a little bit about job setup. And David, this is probably a good time to get a handle for, the folks that are on the phone, what type of system are they using today? And then maybe that can help us to guide what are important things to show.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've put up a quick poll here for what accounting system the company currently operating with, and the choices between QuickBooks, Procast, Deltek has the GCS Premier and CostFoot as well, and some folks who may have Dynamics. And it looks like we have quite a few folks on the Deltek GCS poll.
Okay. All right, excellent. So let's go ahead and let's close that poll down. What's the final? Let's get an idea of the final numbers here. So it looks like we've got a little over 60% that are on GCS Premier, about 20% on CostPoint, 15% on QuickBooks, and then 5% that are on Procast today. So it's a great mix of companies for what we have today, and I'm just getting my Power BI login for the later part of the demonstration. So we've got a lot of folks that are on GCS, so we'll cover some things that are specific to GCS to speak to that. So where we left off is we were talking a little bit about the work breakdown structure and how that whole element is set up. So we were talking about setting funding. The next thing to note is from a billing perspective, and we'll print some invoices later, even though I record at level 2 or level 3, I can roll that invoice up to level 1 if I need to. So you can record time at a lower level, and then when you generate the bill, do that at, in this case, level 1, and we'll show you how you do that later on in the presentation. The next thing to note is I just expanded these fields. One says visible on timesheet, one says visible on expense and requisitions. What this is doing is telling the system, for a particular charge code, do I make that available on a timesheet or expense report, both or neither? The system, as soon as I add this, it automatically makes it available on people's timesheets. The people that it makes available to is decided by this membership. So pardon me, you're assigning people to the job, and then they're able to see that charge code for whatever the length of the period of performance is. So where that's stored is on each one of these tasks and subtasks, there's something called task detail. And a little about the task detail. So the first thing is, if it's not entered at the task level, it looks back up to the top level. If you want to override it, you can here. So if this task was only available from, we'll say, from January 1st of this year through 12/31, now when people try to charge to the setup task, it's only available during this year. Other things you can override is everything related to revenue and billing. So if I had a firm fixed price task on a mainly cost type contract, at the task level I can override that revenue and billing formula. Now we were talking about membership, so the period of performance of the task drives how long it's visible for, but you can also have individual people that are charging to that task or subtask, and they can see it for a period that might be different than the POP, so a more restricted level. From there, you can define approval hierarchies related to time, expense, and requisitions. Those approval hierarchies, you've got unlimited number of approvals for each one of those levels. So that's the idea of the overall project structure, how it's defined, and how people can actually decide funding, contract value, and then what type of charge it is. The next thing we'll talk about on this particular job is we'll talk a little bit about the budgeting side of it. So this is the place where you can define by resource how many hours are going to be available from a budget perspective. So I'm identifying people that are going to work, then choosing the number of hours. After I select the number of hours, there's also a copy function you can use. And what copy allows you to do is to copy those labor hours from 1 month to those successive months, or you can copy your ODCs. There is the ability to identify a percent increase. So you can have that percent increase either on a particular date or on each resource's anniversary date. Same idea with ODCs. When it comes to the labor, though, the system actually looks at, there's a calendar, a work calendar you can assign to people. And what it does is it looks at the number of hours that are available for that person in the month to come up with a ratio. So, for instance, maybe in May of 2016, this resource only has 150 available hours. It's saying they're a full-time resource, a 1 FTE. When it copies it to June, it'll look at how many hours are available in June for that resource to identify how many June hours. Once you calculate all the direct costs, this recalculate totals function, what it does is it'll actually do all the calculations based on the hours and what's the projected labor cost, what's the projected indirects, and then based on the setup, what is, in this case, it's the cost plus fixed fee, what's the level of fee that you're going to earn based on those components. So that's how you're setting up the job budget. A couple things to note, you have the ability to set up an unlimited number of budgets, so there's no limits on the budget from a reporting perspective. Also import, export from Excel. So now we've set up a job, we've defined funding, defined the WBS. I guess the last thing before we start charging time, we might want to set up some alerts. And what alerts are used for is to identify that a condition has been met and send out an email to somebody. So the comparisons that are available are spent versus billed. So billed means you've posted the invoice. Spent means that you've actually used up that funding. So on a T&M job, it looks at hours times the labor rate for a labor category code assigned to a resource to come up with how much you've actually used of the spent value, how much of that total amount that you could bill has been used. You can compare that to the funded or budgeted value. So we showed you the funding at the detailed line, and we just went through a little bit on the budget. Then you can set an alert. So at 60% or 50 or whatever you key in, you can send an alert out to the PM, maybe to the task manager, or if you want to just hand key an email address in there, you can do that. and it's going to each night look at those comparisons, determine if the condition has been met, and if it has, send an email out to that individual. So that's a little bit in terms of the general setup related to a job. I do want to touch on a T&M job real briefly, just because I want to show you some differences there. So we're going to go into this T&M job. I won't go through the other setups because they're very similar. But what I do want to show is on a T&M, instead of it being built on a cost-plus basis, the labor is billed based on a labor rate. So what you're setting up is for this job, so you can see for job 2025, by labor category code, by effective date, what the bill rate is. If I wanted to look at just one labor category code, so let's just look at project management. We're going to go ahead and filter that value. Here are, the future. Wow, we've got this out to a lot of years here. You can see it goes out to 2061. This must be a really long-term contract. Here are the labor rates. What the system does is it is going to default for those people based on this setup, what the labor category code they're working under, and in essence, what is the bill rate for that resource. Anytime you're in a list like this, a report or a ledger, if you wanted to send the data to Excel, you're going to see the send to Excel option, or you can see in parentheses it says you can also use Control-E if you like to use functions. So I will use the Control-E function, and now what's going to happen is that information that was inside the system has now been sent off to Excel. So this is the history of the T&M rates for project management on this job. If I wanted to enter a couple more years, I can go ahead and do that in Excel if I would like, and I can actually copy this and we'll paste it back in. So I can actually make edits in Excel or updates in Excel, new lines in Excel, and then I can come back in here, and if I just right-click and say paste those rows, you can see it actually takes that data from Excel and pastes it in here. So it does the same validation. So if I change the job number and the job number was wrong, or this labor category code, or maybe this date isn't a valid date, or the number wasn't a number, it still validates it like I'm entering it. But it's a way that if I wanted to do something in Excel, I can streamline that entry coming back in. All right, so before we go into the time entry, Damon, I think this is a good place to find out if people are even using Excel today. So let's see if the folks on the phone, what type of Microsoft products they're using.
All right, thanks, Paul. I'm going to go ahead and launch a quick poll here for you guys. That what Microsoft products are you using today? We have some out there that Office 365, SharePoint, Dynamics CRM, and Outlook. And as the questions come in, you can choose more than one too. So if they all apply, you can click on all four of them. Looks like SharePoint and Outlook have taken off here. You know, there are some folks looking at Office 365 as well. Those numbers are rolling in here. Looks like we're almost 100% on Outlook. I'd say close to about 40% on SharePoint and about 20% Office 365.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Excellent. I think that sounds good, Damon. I think what that says is that we know Office 365 is getting a lot of penetration, and I think that'll be a good lead-in. At the end, we're going to show a little bit on Power BI and how that is leveraged via Office 365 and how it's going to work natively with NAV in 2016. All right, so now we've created projects, and now we want to start, charging the time so we can actually bill that out. So I'm over on the timesheet side now, and as an employee, some of the things that I can do is, one, I can look up my PTO balance. This PTO category is it's more generic, and what I mean by that is each client can set up their own PTO category. So if you only offer PTO, or if you have vacation and sick time, you set up the categories that you use, and also the accrual rate for the employees, and the system will calculate how many hours they earn each period, and then decrement it as they use it. If I'm an employee, I can also request time off. So if I need time off in the future, I can go in and request that time off. Maybe I need some time around Thanksgiving. I think Thanksgiving might be on the 26th now, and if maybe I need the week leading up to it, I'm going to take some time off. I can go in and request that time off, and then this will send an email out to my approver, and my approver can approve or reject. Oh, I put the wrong. Yep, thanks, Dan. It would let me know if I did make that mistake, but my approver can approve or reject that time off request. If they approve it, it's going to automatically go on the timesheet. If they reject it, they'll have to put a reason why they're rejecting it. I could also set up favorites. So this would be, here's the jobs that I charge to on a regular basis. I can set those up, and every time I create a new timesheet, the system's going to add those favorites on there for me. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the projects that I worked on. So yesterday I put 8 hours into this particular project. I would enter my time in there. If I needed to put a comment in, I would just enter that here, say OK, save it. That's what I'm going to do on a daily basis. So that would be the process that I would follow as an end user. At the end of my timesheet period, I click the submit button, and then this is going to trigger the approval my signature process. So this would be my signature and saying you're certifying the timesheet. And once you click OK, and I won't because we're not done with the week yet, it's going to send an email to your approver, and then they can go in and approve the time. They would see it right here in the approval window. So that's the process as a user of how I'm going to actually enter time. How I'd enter expenses, I'd go to the expense tab. To create a new expense report, I just hit add expense, and then it will identify when did I actually travel for this expense report. So maybe it was from the 18th, and I just got back on the 23rd, a little description of travel. So we'll say we traveled to Austin. Click Save, and now it's going to create my expense header for me. From here, once I've got the header, I can either add lines to my expense report, maybe for my mileage to the airport, or if I'm traveling based on per diem, I would use the per diem wizard, and I'd go ahead and enter in here the details of where was I actually during the process. So we'd say we went to Austin, Texas. You can type in and it filters it down, or I can just hit the list and select it, click Next, and then from here I'm going to identify how long was I in Austin, and for the sake of simplicity, we'll just say I was there the whole time. Was I working on a particular job? So maybe it was this job I was working on, and then it was the go live function, so whatever the WBS codes are that are available to me. The lodging, what's the lodging code? Again, I can type it or I can select it. Then what's the meals? And they're going to only see the particular codes that are available for that job. So if maybe if you didn't offer, there's no travel for that job, one, you probably wouldn't have the job set up. Maybe it's only local travel. You could have it where they could only see mileage. They wouldn't see lodging as an option. I click Next, and it shows me my lodging and meals and incidentals for the different days. Maybe breakfast was included with lodging. I would uncheck those. Click Next, and now I'm going to enter my actual room rate, whatever my taxes are. Click Finish, and now it's going to build that expense report for me. So it's going to handle the 75% first day and last day details here. If I had any receipts, if I needed to attach maybe the receipt for the airfare, you can just drag and drop or select that receipt from your particular desktop. Once I finish that process, I'm going to save it. Then finally, I'm going to click that Submit button, which is going to trigger the approval process. So now it's going to send an email out to my approver so they know that that expense report's out there and available for approval. The thing that you're going to see is, as I was entering that expense report, actually in real time, that document's actually created in the accounting system. So It's not a financial document. It's just it's a document for review, so it doesn't have any financial impact until accounting does their final review and posts it. But you can look even, it got created for me already. I can see who's supposed to approve it. It's in submitted status to them. Once they approve it, it gets flipped to approved status. And in this case, when did that status happen? So it got sent to them today at 11:45 for approval. And then finally, the attachments would be any documents they attach from the web. So, you can see how the process gets streamlined. You're not rekeying information, making it easy for a user to see the details and where things are in the workflow. So the next thing we had is we also entered labor, and let's talk a little bit about the labor processing and how that whole process, how you would go through that function. So as a timesheet administrator in a company, one of the things that's, I guess, one of the big challenges is getting people to actually enter their time. So the first thing you're often doing is running that missing time report. So they're going to get visibility of who hasn't, submitted their time or doesn't have their time approved. I could print this. I could send it to PDF, Word, Excel. I can also schedule it. So maybe it's supposed to happen. Everybody's supposed to have their time in by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I could actually run this and schedule it for tomorrow at 9, and then it would just show up in my inbox for me. Maybe I show up at 9:15 to work, so now it could actually be printed exactly at 9 o'clock. So as a user, you can schedule those reports for processing at a later point. Next thing is, once I get everybody to enter their time, I'm going to import it. So this is going to bring in all the approved time and create the journal that you're seeing here. From there, you're going to calculate the labor distribution, and that's going to calculate the per hour rate for resources. At that point, you're going to probably run a report to see, make sure that you have everything. So I'm going to go ahead and run a report. And this was the time journal summary report. It's giving me details for each employee, what projects did they charge to, the hours, what was that rate, so whether we use effective rate or standard rate, you're going to see that labor rate calculation. What's going to be the impact on projects, on the GL, also any type of benefits that were used. So that would be, the whole PTO side, any of that was used. Any report, like we mentioned earlier, even after you run it, you can also export it out. Once I complete that process, if you use third-party payroll, whether you use ADP, Paychex, we also integrate with payroll networks and some other providers, you can generate that file so then you don't need to rekey the information into the payroll system. If you do payroll in-house, there's also a payroll module. So that kind of gets you through the whole labor side of it. From there, we've recorded the time, we've recorded the expenses, we've posted those things. So that's kind of how the direct costs are getting recorded in the system. Your indirects are going to come through, labor for those indirect pieces, any type of purchase orders. But how those indirects get allocated out to projects, we're going to talk a little bit about the indirect rate setup. So within cost pool setup, we'll give you a little insight into some of the capabilities here. So the indirect rate setup is as simple or as complex as your business. There is no limitations on the number of pools. So you're only limited, I guess, by your creativity. From that point, what you're seeing is, in my demo example, I've got fringe, 2 overheads, and a G&A. The one requirement is you see the sequence number over to the left. If you have, because this contains both intermediate and final pools, if you have an intermediate pool, in this case fringe, it doesn't go to projects, it's allocated into my overhead and G&A. That sequence has to happen above the final pool where those costs are used. Once you define overall pool structure, the next thing is for each one of these pools, you've got to define what's in my pool and what's in my base. So in this case, all of my overhead accounts for certain departments, in this case my client site departments, that's what I'm accumulating in terms of my pool. And then my base is my direct labor cost for those same departments with my fringe cost applied. Once I define how that pool gets calculated, next is what happens from an allocation perspective. So when you're setting up the allocations, clients are always looking at things at both provisional and actual rates. So you're telling the system, once I accumulate those costs, what's going to happen to them? In this case, they're going to get allocated out to projects at both provisional and actual. Once you've gone through that step, the last step is to tell the system, what are you using in terms of a provisional rate? Things to note here is you can see that this is also date sensitive. So you've got a date sensitive rate. What is the provisional rate? Also, the final rate is available as an option there. And what happens is each month there's a function you run called allocate costs. And what that's going to do is it's going to do run these allocations based on provisional rate, also calculating your final rate. Also calculating your actual rate. And then once you have the final rate, you can actually run this function, and instead of doing it based on provisional, if you check use final, the system will use that final rate, in essence, true up the rates for you as part of that process. So going back to this indirect rate setup, the last thing to note is actual rates. So this actual rate setup, this actually gets filled in as you're running your rates each month. You'll be able to see the details of, what are my actual rates running month over month. That's a little bit about the indirects, so that kind of last element of cost. We've been talking throughout, about the direct costs. That's a little in terms of our indirect costs. So now that we've recorded our cost, we've run our allocations, now let's go ahead and we'll talk a little bit about generating the invoices. So the next function I'm going to run the create invoice function, and what we're going to do here is we're going to identify the period we're going to run this for. So the first thing is I'm running it for this job. We've got a concept called the billing group, and the idea here is that if you have in your setup, we talked about the different tasks and subtasks. If I had, for example, 4 or 5 tasks that get billed as part of one invoice, you can actually define, what is in your, in this case, we've got our implementation process. I can have multiple tasks that's part of that process. Then I'm identifying the period, saying OK, and what it does is it creates an invoice proposal, which is an invoice worksheet. And this is the place that I'm going to go to actually review the invoice, make sure that it's accurate. So I'd go ahead and we'll just go ahead and print this. This is like my preview function. What I'm going to do here is identify how do I want to print it. So do I want to print it by category group, which is my different expense categories, so my direct expenses, labor, subcontract labor, etc. Category group and labor type. So you've got different types of labor. Do you want to split out those different types of labor? Do I want to print it by resource, which is the person's name, or print the labor category code? Do I want to roll it up? So we talked earlier about this idea of I want to roll it up to level 1 to show all of everything at that top level. Subtotal it by tasks. I won't go through all the functions, but you can define how you want to print this, and then you can also print it in different ways. So I can save the way I want to print it, and then it's going to print it that same way all the time, or I can change it up. You can see based on those setups that I chose there, it's showing my direct labor. So I asked for my labor to be split up by type of labor, and it's rolled up to level 1, which was 001 Dynamics NAV implementation. Here's the people with their labor category code, current data, inception to date data, and you'll see, my burdens, fee, and then all the totals and withholding down there. That invoice, I could export to Excel, PDF, or Word. And just to show you when I print it in a different way, we'll go ahead and we'll reprint this. Instead of by category group and labor type, we're going to show all of the labor in one section. And instead of by resource, we're going to show it by labor category code. And now when we preview it, that same invoice format, you're going to see it's going to look a little bit different. So now the people's names aren't there, and we just have our labor section with the different folks, current period, inception, and date. So it gives you the flexibility to define invoices in different ways. And then from there, send approval request. This would send it off to the PM so they can approve it. And once they approve it, it becomes a posted document. And that posted document, you can reprint this and email it as needed. So that gives you a little insight into different system capabilities. Obviously, today isn't meant to cover all functions. And I'm going to close it out with Damon's got one last poll. And then I'm going to show you a little bit about Power BI. And this poll is around what is it that is the key thing you're looking to improve in your business?
All right, so I have the quick poll up here for, what is the main area of focus for your improvement? Obviously, looking at the accounting software. So, are you looking to improve the reporting capabilities? Are you looking to improve the DCAA compliance with federal regulations and so forth? Are you trying to improve the automation of the manual tasks? And obviously that's always a good one when you can get things done quicker, automate it rather than trying to have someone manually do it, or just more integration with your other systems. And as we go through, letting the poll go out.
Yeah, let's just give them another few minutes. It
Sure.
looks like we got about half the people that have voted.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got an interesting split. I guess folks on the phone, compliance is probably part of what they already do. We've only got 3% for compliance. We've got 30% for reporting, and we've got looks like, well, reporting continues to go up. We got a little over 50% for more integrated system. So it looks like reporting and integrated system are probably the top two. And I guess that's appropriate for me to close this out with our part of the presentation regarding Power BI and what that is. So for folks that want to research it more, Power BI, it's part of Office 365. And what Microsoft's doing is incorporating it into NAV. One of the things it allows you to do is, I've just got some sample dashboards up. So it allows me to create a set of dashboards and make these available for people. And then from the dashboards, if there's one in particular you want to learn more about, you can actually select the dashboard, and it actually drills me into the dashboard. So now I'm on an actual dashboard, and you can see in my demo example, it's showing me, a sales dashboard. So I'm seeing by country, by what we sell, what is the value of that. If I select any one of these areas, so if I select Great Britain as the country I want to analyze, you can see the different products that we sell, and how that changes. So it's the ability to analyze things on the fly, provide these dashboards out to people, so then they can analyze the business. You can also ask a question, so, there's some sample questions that were typed in here, but I'll just select, you can just, start typing, some amount by country. So now this is showing me information about sales in these different countries. If I hover over them, you can see, what were the sales in the individual countries. It also allows you to build your own views on the fly. So if I go into a sample data set, this is kind of like my white space here. Then over to the right, just like when we were showing in Excel, this is a similar idea. These are the different measures that I want to analyze. And then I'm just showing different options for periods. So if I wanted to see things by quarter, I can just select, by quarter what I want to see, and then what is the data I want to analyze. I want to see profit and sales by quarter. And let's go ahead and take that, and we'll turn it into a graph. So now I'm just seeing a quick graph that's showing, profit and sales by quarter. And now I can create another view, and maybe I want to see, let's look at that same information. Let's look at it maybe by country and region. So we'll say by country and region, we're going to look at our profit there. And when I select a particular country, actually let's make this one bigger. So over to the right here. And now if I wanted to select a particular country, now you can see that the profit and sales gets updated for that particular region. So it allows me to build a view and then on the fly, kind of select things that I want to analyze, and then that analysis, it updates those other particular objects in my analysis view. So this is kind of giving you an idea, a little preview of Power BI, what that offers. And I know that we ran out of time, so I know there's a bunch of questions, but what we'll do is we'll follow up with you guys via email or a phone call to answer any of those questions, because we want to make sure we leave you on time. It's noon right now, but again, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We're glad you took some time to learn about Microsoft Dynamics NAV on the government contracting side, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.